Pay attention to your body. The body often knows something before the mind does.
You're not here for the same old, same old. You're not here for just tips. You're here because something in you knows it's time to change. Not just how you lead, but how you live. I'm Janet Ioli, and this is The Inner Edge, a podcast about leadership, self-mastery, resilience, and reinvention for a new world era. Real life, whole self, let's go there. Welcome to The Inner Edge.
Have you ever noticed how your best insights rarely come when you force them? They come in the shower, on a walk, while you're driving, or when your mind finally has a chance to get really quiet, like in the middle of the night when you wake up. In that space between all the things we're doing, something deeper emerges. You start to access what I call your higher wisdom, or for women, I call it your inner wise woman. The intelligence that we all have that sits behind and beneath the noise of thought, beneath all the logic of strategy and analysis, and beneath the endless chatter of your mind. And it's interesting, and I've been thinking about this a lot, in a world obsessed with speed, data, and productivity, this kind of intelligence might be the rarest leadership superpower of them all. So welcome to this episode of The Inner Edge, because that's our topic today. One of the most fascinating things I've seen after working with leaders for several decades now is how they, and myself included, rely on rational analysis to make decisions. And how when we only rely on rational analysis, those decisions later turn out to be incomplete. We've been conditioned to equate thinking, our thinking ability and our cognitive ability with intelligence. We build spreadsheets, we run scenarios, we consult the data. Well, what does the data say? All necessary, yes. But when the information is conflicting, and when the stakes are high, and when there's no clear precedent on what we're trying to decide, logic, just logic, falls short. And I've talked about this before, because that's when your deeper knowing starts whispering. Neuroscience research backs this up, because I know some of you are thinking, well, that's fuzzy and we can't rely on that deeper knowing. How do we know what that is? Neuroscience does back this up. So Antonio Damasio, a professor of neuroscience at USC, found that people with damage to the emotional centers of the brain, think about this, their emotional centers had been damaged. They could analyze data endlessly. But the problem was they couldn't make a decision. And why? Because emotion and intuition provide the essential context for judgment. See, our rational mind is brilliant at processing data, but our intuitive mind synthesizes meaning. We make meaning of that data. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of data. When we ignore that second form of our knowing, we're only using half of our intelligence. And I think that's a really important point here, that the meaning that we make out of the data is just as important as the data itself. So let me tell you about two executives I coached a few years ago. Both were working at major organizations, and both faced really high stakes, really huge decisions. And the first one, I'll call him Mark, was preparing to merge his business unit with another business unit. And he was the epitome of meticulous. He was the analyzer. He gathered all the data. He consulted people. He modeled every possible outcome, made sure he had all the T's crossed. But he kept delaying the decision because he said the data was never perfect. There was always a piece missing. And he said, I don't feel right about it yet. And he couldn't explain why. He just couldn't explain why it just didn't fit somehow. The second person, Priya, was in a similar situation. But when she reached that same dilemma, because she had the exact same experience, she was analyzing all the data and it just felt wrong. Here's what she did. She took 2 days completely off. And this was hard to do, obviously, at this level, but this is what she did. No laptop, no meetings, no emails. She went hiking. She took a notebook with her and was writing what thoughts were coming to her head and gave herself space to listen inwardly. When she came back from those 2 days, she said, I know exactly what to do. Her decision wasn't based on analyzing the spreadsheet, and it wasn't based on synthesizing all the things, all the data and coming up with a perfect solution. She integrated the logic, yes, but also she really accessed her intuition, her experience, her pattern recognition, and her own values. 6 months later, her decision proved to be spot on. Now, the difference wasn't that she was more intelligent. It was that she accessed something deeper. Priya accessed a deeper layer of knowing that's available to all of us if we learn how to listen to it. So when I talk about higher wisdom, I'm not talking about something mystical or esoteric, although that can also be a part of that, of a higher wisdom. I'm talking about the deeper intelligence that emerges when your nervous system is regulated, your mind is quiet, and your awareness expands beyond the craziness around us. Researchers in cognitive neuroscience actually call this the default mode network, the part of the brain that is still active during rest, during times of reflection, and also when we're imagining, when we're in imagination. It's where we integrate our memories, our emotions, and experiences and get new insights. But that only happens when there's a steadiness, when it's calm, when it's silent. And think about our world and how we operate today. It's just constant coming at us. So in other words, you literally think better when you stop trying so hard to think. A study from the University of Amsterdam found that people who stepped away from a complex decision and let their unconscious process it outperformed those who overanalyzed it consciously. So they were consciously, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And just kind of let it rest in the background. Because remember, there's so much, 95% of what's going on in our head is in the background. It's unconscious. That's why your best ideas often show up when you stop forcing them, because you're not allowing those unconscious forces to play. Higher wisdom isn't about knowing more. It's about accessing what you already know, but haven't yet processed or haven't yet synthesized. Modern leadership culture, however, rewards action, rewards thinking, not stillness. It doesn't reward you taking off 2 days to go think and go for a hike. That doesn't really register as something valuable to do. We value decisiveness, speed, urgency, output. But here's the paradox. When we don't slow down enough to connect with this inner guidance we have, this operating system, we end up taking our actions and making our decisions from fear, from pressure, from ego, or from habit. Well, I guess this is the next thing to do because this is what I always do. Not from real integrated clarity. So one CEO I coached said something that really stuck with me. He said, I've built a company that moves faster than I can think. That's the problem so many leaders and so many of us face. We're flooded with information. We've got opinions, we've got noise. I mean, you go on social media, you turn on the TV, we're at work, we're bombarded with information. Our attention is fragmented. It's a little bit over here. You're multitasking, looking at your phone. We're thinking about something else. In that state, which most of us find ourselves in, it's almost impossible to access the quiet, grounded wisdom that synthesizes all of this and tells us what really matters. So we make reactive choices. We confuse motion. Okay, I'm done with that. Check it off for progress. And we lose touch with the one compass that never fails, our own higher intelligence. And when I say never, I don't mean never, but it is a source that if we listen to it, is really accurate. So how do you access this deeper layer of knowing, this intuition, this other place? It's not complicated, but it does require intention because we don't spend a lot of time doing it. Here's a few things that I want to offer you on how to access this. First of all, and this is the hardest part, is we've got to create stillness because our lives are not still. And it's not like when we lie down to go to bed and we start thinking about the 300,000 things that we have to do. Quiet is not a luxury, it's a leadership necessity. So just 10 minutes of silence a day helps deactivate the stress response and it re-engages our brain's integrative networks. And that's what we're talking about. Neuroscientists at Harvard have shown that mindfulness practice increases gray matter density in regions associated with learning and emotional regulation. So what that's saying, and you can call this meditation, you can call it just sitting quietly, you can call it stillness, going for a walk and just clearing your mind, taking breaths, whatever you want to call it. It's a place where you allow your mind to feel still. And I know that's really hard for many of us. And many of the high achievers that I talk with say, I can't sit still. I can't relax. Well, that's the problem. Another thing, the second thing is to listen below the noise. So when you feel torn between options, notice the internal chatter, what's going on in your head, and then drop a layer deeper. And by that, I mean, ask yourself, go into feeling, what feels true? What aligns with my integrity? What decision feels expansive to me, not contracted? It's not making me smaller. It's not making my body tense up. Wisdom often speaks softly, but it's steady. And so learning to listen in that way, and I know this sounds a little bit ethereal, but it's really, really important to start tuning into yourself in a different way than perhaps we're used to. The third thing is, and this is absolute wisdom, it took me a very long time to get to this and to understand this. Pay attention to your body. The body often knows something before the mind does. Research by neurophysiologist Candace Pert found that emotion is stored and processed throughout your body. Your gut feeling isn't just a metaphor. So when you're aligned, your body relaxes, and when you're off, it tightens. And you can feel it. Like sometimes I'll be sitting in a meeting and my shoulders are tensed up and I don't even know it. And then I'll understand that there's something in the meeting that's off center for me. And so then I take a breath and relax my shoulders. And then, I'm doing that intentionally. But when you're aligned, your body relaxes. When you're off, it tightens. And you need to learn that language because your body's telling you stuff all the time. And you can see it when you tense up and when you're just when I go to the dentist, my body tenses up. I'm off. It's like, oh gosh, I do not want to be here. And finally, the fourth thing is to reflect before reacting. And I say this almost in every episode, and it's the secret sauce, really. This is the discipline. This is the rep, is build pauses into your decision-making processes. And so before you do something big, even a short walk outside before responding to a difficult email, or having a difficult conversation allows your nervous system to reset and your higher intuition to surface. And so you're able to access parts of yourselves. Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking today, I got some news that I didn't really like from an institution, and it was an academic institution, and I was going back and forth, and it was some rule that I think is ridiculous. And so I found myself going into a meltdown. It's like, I can't believe this. I don't want that. I'm done with this. I don't want to have anything to do with this. This is so stupid. These people are out of touch. They don't know what they're doing. I went into this meltdown by myself once I got this email. And I was getting ready to fire off an email, and I said, okay, take a break, relax, build the pause into your decision-making process, think it through, let yourself integrate all the data and come up with a better solution. And the reality is, once I got the emotion out of it, I felt my body relax, and I was able to come up with a non-meltdown response and also solution to the problem. So, and the problem was not as big as I had made it in that moment, but that's what happens because our body is the responding, and then our emotional sense is exaggerated. So your higher inner wisdom isn't out there somewhere. It's in you. So we're constantly looking for the answers outside. Where is it? Where do I find the answer? Who can tell me? Accessing that inside requires stillness in a world that is constantly pulling us towards speed, towards hurry, towards let's do it. And I have a sense of urgency. I'm a doer. I'm a go, go, go person. And what I've learned, and I'm still learning it, is that I can't access that calm wisdom inside myself, that guide that I am, without slowing down a little. And the leaders who will thrive in the future are not going to be the most strategic or intelligent. They're the most self-aware. They're the ones who've learned to integrate their intellect with their intuition, their logic with insight, and their thinking with who they're being in the moment and with their presence. This integration that I'm talking about, that inner alignment, is what gives you the inner edge, which is the whole theme of this podcast. So this week, I invite you to experiment with this. Don't rush into your next big decision. Step back, breathe, because I was about to make a decision just today, right, in my meltdown, to fire off this email that would have changed the course of something I was working on. Breathe. And it's not just emotional regulation. This is accessing something bigger, something more purposeful. So ask yourself not just what should I do, but what feels deeply right. And when you're swept up in the moment, either by analysis or by emotion, you can't really discern until you give some space for your inner wisdom to speak. And it does. It will. And when you follow it, you lead from a place that's not reactive, but it's a deep place of inner wisdom that comes from a higher source, a collective source that you may not even realize is there, but it's always there. So thanks for listening today. This is a really, really critical topic, I think, for our time. And it is a piece of self-mastery. And it is definitely the inner edge.